Thank you very much, Ambassador, for this very generous welcome, very generous introduction. I'm very happy to be here. We had a good cooperation with the Academy, which we are very happy about, and we look forward to continue this cooperation. Regarding our talk today, we'll talk about the foreign policy of Saudi Arabia. I don't know, the changing world, I don't know, maybe jump from somewhere, but that's fine. We can talk about the changing world. But let me first introduce to you my colleagues who will also participate in our discussion. I like it very much to be conversational today. This is not a formal lecture, but rather an attempt at a dialogue, a friendly dialogue between friends. And I am here as much to learn as anything else. So start from my right as the addition, Dr. Mansour Al-Marzouqi is a professor of political science at the Diplomatic Institute and a director of the Strategic Studies Center. Dr. Rija Al-Marzouqi, he's a professor of economics at our institute and he's the chief advisor of the finance ministry and recently has been appointed chief negotiator for the GCC, for trade relations. And Dr. Ali Al-Gherni, he's a professor of mass communication and director of the Center for Asian Studies. He also worked in diplomacy and Czech in France, and he worked in London as well. Now, I will, Henry VIII used to, as you know, he married a lot. He has a particular weakness to women, and he married, and of course, his Catholic religion doesn't allow divorce, so he had to divorce his wife, and he had to split in the church, and he starts marrying and marrying at free will. But each new wife, he will tell her, I say, I promise you one thing, I won't keep you alone. So I promise you, I won't keep you alone here. I'll try to be as brief as, I won't keep you long, sorry. I try to be as brief as possible. And what I want to present is really an outline of the Saudi foreign policy as I understand it. I am speaking completely as an academic, and there could be different takes, different perspectives, and this is my perspective on it. It's more of on this what I see as the structural framework within within which Saudi foreign policy works, and then we can, in the discussion, happily I'll be happy as well as I'm sure my friends to talk about current issues. But I want to give a structural outline of the Saudi foreign policy. Now, to the beginning, the point of departure, I think, should be of the nature of the Saudi state. After all, this is the foreign policy of the state. And if I want to summarize the nature of the Saudi state, the current state, which has been established as a sovereign, independent state in 1932. If I will summarize it, it is this: it's to create a modern state within the confines of the Islamic Sharia. Okay, so that's really for me, that's the shortest possible way of summarizing the Saudi state. Now, this may sound rather bland or may sound rather straightforward, but I think it's very important if you situate it in its historical context. Now, within that historical context, I'm talking about the creation in 1932. At that era, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, there were basically two other competing projects. One project says that if you want a modern state, you should divorce with the Sharia. And that is Kemalism, you know, and all its offshoots. There is another, on the right, there is another trend which says we have to preserve Islam in the way it's understood, and even at the expense of acquiring modernity. Okay? The Saudi project is to say no. We'll build a modern state within the what we see as the general flexible framework of the Islamic faith. So that's basically the strategic starting. Now, I want to and if we look at it, I mean, the state was founded by King Abdulaziz Al Saud in the Western literature, and you know it all. They call him Ibn Saud. Ibn Saud. Now, Ibn Saud, and with this project, I would say he is one of the three major historic figures in the Middle East. Why? First of all, the other two are Kemal Ataturk of Turkey, the father of modern Turkey. The other one is Riza Shah, the father of the last Shah of Iran. And the third, I would say, King Abdulaziz, because they all built a state. Ataturk built a state from the legacy of the Ottomans. The Riza Shah built the state of Iran as we know it today, and King Abdulaziz built a state in Arabia, of course, banking on an early history, but I'm talking about the state that we are living in. And I would say King Abdulaziz is the more remarkable of them. Why? Because they had states. There is Turkey, there is Iran. But King Abdulaziz, he created a state over 30 years of struggle, by all means, politics, war, etc. So that's the baseline. Now, when we, I want to emphasize here the idea that it's building modern state within the confines of the Islamic faith. So the idea of modernization has been there from the very beginning. It's built into the identity of the state that it is a modernizing state. That is to say that it sees its task, whether rightly or wrongly, but it sees it as taking society on a different path from what history has produced to it so far. So modernizing state, modernizing society, modernizing economy, modernizing the state has been essential from there until today, when we have the Vision 2030, which is a qualitative leap in that project and deserve talking about, but that I leave it to a separate discussion. So modernizing is very much within the essence of the Saudi state. This, of course, I know goes against, the stereotypical imaging of a country which is inward, and then modernization coming to it. And no, it was from the beginning open to the idea and the practice of modernization. And actually, in the history of Saudi Arabia, there has been an important struggle in 1929 between King Abdulaziz and his opponents. His opponents there, one of their main causes is that they were against certain modernizing instruments like telegram, radio, things like that. And he was for it. And his defeat of those enemies, shortly after he declared the creation of the Kingdom of Saudi. Now, from this conceptual background regarding the nature of the state, it follows that enhancing economic, political, social, and administrative development is an essential goal and a major dynamic animating the Saudi state and, by extension, Saudi foreign policy, imparting to it an international orientation. That is to say, given the nature of the state, that it is a modernizing state, and modernization here means necessarily opening up to the world outside, and not necessarily the neighboring countries, because they are in the same development. You need something further afield. That made the idea of a foreign policy essential for this project, and gave the state an opening towards the international environment from the very beginning. Now, this international or globalist orientation of Saudi foreign policy was further enhanced by the fact that the kingdom is the custodian of the two holy mosques of the world religion of Islam. Here, I want to emphasize the holy places. So there is the custodian, and we are custodian of the sacred places of Islam, which is a world religion. What I mean by world religion is not simply universal. It's not the idea that it has a universal message, but with the 20th century and increasingly, Muslims are everywhere. So when we talk about Muslims, when we talk about Islam, we are talking about world religion in the sense that there are Muslims, more or less, and increasingly everywhere in the world. So the coming from being a custodian to the two holy mosques also make a connection with people of the Muslim faith who are nationals of most countries in the world. There are very few countries which one can say the same. Now, furthermore, the fact that Saudi Arabia possesses the world's largest proven oil reserve, a commodity of vital importance to the modern economy, that created a structural link of interdependence between its own well-being, its own economic well-being, and the health of the global economy, thereby making maintenance of regional and international peace and security of prime importance to the Saudi conception of national interest. So we have a state, creation of a state which sees itself as modernizing. It has a custodian or a custody of two holiest shrines for a faith which is now international. There are Muslims everywhere. It basically depends for its economy on a commodity, which is oil, which is by its nature it has to be exported and vital to the international economy. So now the link between the well-being, the economic well-being of the country is very much linked with the health and the well-being of the international economy. So there is a structural link between the two. In a way, it's not a choice for you whether you care about the outside world or not, and it's not a choice for the outside world whether they care about you or not. That thing was simply certainly cemented by oil. Now, the international orientation of Saudi foreign policy was also overdetermined by the geostrategic location of the kingdom in the Middle East, a region of the world where, since the early decades of the 20th century, security challenges and political crises often assume a global character. Think of Palestine, for example. So we have three elements. Then we have the fourth element, which is the geopolitical location of Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. Now, for reasons I think obvious, but anyway, this is what happens, is that many crises in the Middle East do not stay as simply Middle Eastern crises, regional. Soon they attract outside interests, for good or for ill. And it's very clear with the Palestine question. So here is a country which is located in a region where a crisis pops up. The crisis is not simply regional, it's international. That forces the Saudi foreign policy regarding this issue, the region, supposedly regional issue, to also have an international connection and dimension. So all these things over-determine Saudi foreign policy in a way that by nature, an engagement with the world, an active engagement with the world is not only was demanded, but it's also imposed for economic and for geopolitical reasons. And here, let me just remind you that manifests itself in the activism of Saudi foreign policy in trying to be part of international organizations. It's never been an isolationist country, actually. Saudi Arabia is actually a founding member of the UN. It was part of the declaration in 1944 in San Francisco, then a founding member of the UN and a signatory to its charter. That's a very few Arab countries had that. It was a founding member of the Islamic Cooperation Organization, which the Muslim world, the Arab League, a founding member of the Arab League, and a founding member and the host of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. Obviously, also it's a host of the Islamic Cooperation Council. So that shows it's a reflection of all these elements that I am saying, that I was alluding to. We are speaking about a foreign policy which is very much engaged in the world, a country which is very much engaged in the world for the reasons, the structural reasons I said. See, this is a very, very different image than when we have in the media. You know, closed kingdom, how we know it, how we, you know. People say, for example, we don't know. I don't know how many people know, but for example, although it predated that, like, but certainly for the past almost 50 years now, almost 55% of the Saudi population are from outside, non-national. The population inside Saudi Arabia. At certain degree, they would be 60%. Today, I think the figure is about 50% are non-Saudis, whether from Arab, Europeans, United States, etc. Today, they reside about about 80,000 Americans living permanently, but usually you find Americans from the mid-70s. The figure always goes between 50 and 60. There are about 30,000 to 40,000 British nationals living in Saudi. The reality is so far from the image that one really has to just bow to see how effective the media can in covering reality. It was said, I think some of you know, the author of Orientalism. He had a book called Covering Islam. And he said, actually the Western media, that was the 80s, and I think it's applicable. He said, no, this media is not covering Islam, it's covering up Islam. So sometimes the media is covering up rather than covering, but it's our duty to, rely on ourselves. Enlightenment is to rely on ourselves. Anyway, so you have the organizations, and I'll just go past towards certain important initiatives to show the globalist orientation of Saudi foreign policy. We have the Arab Peace Plan. We talk about a lot about today Israel. Actually, there's the Arab Summit in 2002. It is an updating version of already a plan was given to in 1981 at the vast summit by then Crown Prince Fahd, and to the Western press they call it the Fahd Plan, okay, of an idea of Israel will withdraw and you have recognition in exchange in the Arab League in 2002 that was updated and endorsed, and still I think many in Europe will consider it to be a reasonable, at least a framework for resolving that conflict. We have as well a global initiative to promote intercultural and interreligious dialogue as a means of preventing and resolving conflict, as institutionalized by King Abdullah bin Abdul Aziz International Center for Interfaith and Intercultural Dialogue. Do you know where? Where is the center? Please. The one who knows will, but before you answer, the one who knows, please raise the hand. But don't answer. Only one person knows. I am almost scandalized. Okay, one, please. No, yeah, where? In Lisbon. Sir? In Vienna. It is here in Vienna. It has been here for about 15 years. It was a center created for, because Vienna is a city of dialogue, culture, and exchange. It was chosen. 3 states signed for it: Saudi Arabia, Spain, and Austria. Before that, they went to the UN. They had the UN endorsement, and they had the headquarters in Vienna. Unfortunately, it kept raining and raining in Vienna, so they moved to Lisbon. Okay. But now move to Lisbon. For reasons, if you want, we can talk about it in the discussion. No. And then we have the initiative to create the Islamic Military Counter-Terrorism Coalition 2015. And you know, there was a lot of talk about why Muslims don't go and fight Daesh, etc. And Saudi Arabia initiated that. Yeah, we'll have a Muslim military, etc. And that was and of course, there are so many other initiatives, but one in particular, I think, worth noting, is the Green Middle East. Contrary to what people think, actually, Saudi Arabia has been very much with the idea of transition in the, to the green economy, and there are a great deal of many initiatives and many efforts and funds put into that. So it's not it's one of the greatest friends of a clean environment and protecting Mother Earth. Okay? Using a classification utilized in the literature on foreign policy analysis, one can say that Saudi Arabia is not a revisionist state. It's not a revisionist state, but a security-seeking, satisfied state. And I explain that. But a security-seeking, yes, satisfied state. As it stands today, Saudi Arabia do not have any territorial claims or disputes. Its borders are delimited by internationally ratified agreement with all its neighbors. All the borders. There's no border dispute or any border which has not been demarcated. It's all demarcated and ratified and submitted to the UN. The primary interest of satisfied states such as Saudi Arabia lies in preserving the stability and maintaining the security of the region, where the emphasis is put on respecting international legality and norms. Now, I will talk about brief. Do I have more time or do I have to stop now? Okay, a few minutes. So regional security challenge. As mentioned previously, a fundamental trait of the Saudi state is its developmental dimension. It is this developmental thrust which within few decades transformed the kingdom from a state of extreme poverty to being a member of the G20 grouping, possessing the largest economy, by far actually, the largest economy in the Arab world. Moreover, this developmental path today is entering a qualitative new stage with Vision 2030. Now, the logic of development requires this logic. If you want to do this kind of development, requires a stable regional environment. But this is in short supply today in considerable parts of the Middle East. So I'm trying now to get into the challenges that Saudi foreign policy faces, which is one of them is the region. We live in the aftermath. We live today in the aftermath of the so-called Arab Spring. All the Arab countries which witnessed the political turmoil of 2011 are suffering from severe economic crises and huge reductions in their GDP. They also suffer in varying degrees from serious problems in state-society relations, reaching in some cases the point of state failure and civil war. The overwhelming effects have been the growing problem of political violence, as we can see in Sudan, for example, and the displacement, and this is a huge problem, the displacement of large populations. Today, the area from Mosul in the west Iraq, northwest Iraq, northeast Iraq, Mosul to Tripoli in Libya, this contains per capita the largest amount of refugees, displaced people, etc., in the world. Now let me stop here. Let me say this. I mean, this problem, obviously, no one country, or even the region can tackle. And this is a huge humanitarian and security problem. One only, insist on talking about security. And unless we frame it as an international challenge and not simply a regional challenge, let the region do with it. It will never be resolved. It will multiply, etc. So there is a great deal. There is a real need, not just to talk the talk, but to walk the walk. Not just to say, yes, we are with, this thing has to be solved, but there has to be joint efforts, genuine efforts in that, investment in that. And I see very, very little coming from outside. And I think I will stop here, but with just one minute. The regional problems. This is important. There are so many real challenges for Saudi. Saudi wants to concentrate on making this leap from a rentier state economy to a productive economy. That's a historical leap. That's not an easy thing to do, but the path is there, the vision is there, the determination is there, and the indicators that the country is walking on that path are also there. I can say something about that in the discussion. But then you cannot have a prosperous economy in an impoverished environment. Usually people, countries trade with their neighbors, etc., etc. So unless their neighbors are prosperous as well, you will not prosper. That's seems to me an elementary fact. But the challenges that we have, for example, displaced people, the weak states, etc., the problem is that they are framed usually as being regional problems. So they say, okay, the best thing is for the Middle Easterners or for to deal with it. And usually they give you this kind of convoluted kind of rationale, because culture is important and they know each other and they can speak the language, and we don't speak the language and they have different culture. So better they deal with this problem. It's, no. You need investment, you need expertise. The most difficult thing to do is to rescue a state from a status of being weak, and definitely most difficult when it is a failed state. But we need all the efforts, all of us, to frame it, but cooperate in this. But first, we have to frame it as a common challenge to all of us, but not a challenge to some, and others are somehow immune from it. And thank you, sir. And thank you for it.